So, language learning with comprehensible input. It's a nice idea, but how do you do it if you don't actually know what's going on? And whilst I talk to you about language learning, today we're going to be assembling Billy with the help of my friends here. Look at that happy chap. I tried immersion and just listening to TV and radio in either Spanish or Chinese, whatever I was going to target at the time, and thinking maybe I'll just pick it all up. But in actual fact, I didn't really pick up an awful lot, if anything at all. Got a sense of the sounds of the language and the intonation, but in terms of grammar and vocabulary, nothing. Small note, by the way, if you don't really understand anything that's going on, your mind is much more likely to wander, and then what's the point of listening to it in the first place? It was only when I went for easier videos or stories that something actually clicked. So I think for me, what finally clicked was when I went from doing something that felt like learning and trying to find interesting things in my target language, which, to be honest, were a bit too hard for me. And instead, put my ego to one side and I went for some really, really easy things. And it was only when I started listening to stories or whatever in my target language, and they were super, super easy, so I just naturally acquire more grammar and vocabulary without even having to think about it, because I knew pretty much everything in that sentence or in that bit of the story, and there would just be a couple of small new bits, or I knew everything, I knew all of the words, but I'd never had them put in that order before, and it just got me more comfortable with how the language started to piece together. It might sound like more work, but in fact, because it's more pleasant to do, I'm more likely to do more of it, and then I get more input. And that's all you need, just lots and lots of input. By finding easier content, you'll pick up more of the language. And the research supports this, to be honest. It's like the whole extensive reading versus intensive reading thing. If you take intensive reading, you take content that's slightly too hard, but then you learn all the vocabulary in it as you go. It feels more like studying, it's a bit of a heavier lift, but you'll get more vocabulary from it. As opposed to extensive reading, which is basically reading content that's really, really easy, or about your level, maybe slightly just above it. Not super, super hard, but it's just quite pleasant to do, and you can hopefully start to read topics you enjoy, or find something that's certainly at least enjoyable enough for you. It's got a high percentage of known words. The research seems to suggest that actually that's where people do best at language learning. And the interesting thing about this is grammar. So I don't study grammar because I don't like it. And I know Professor Stephen Krashen, the man, the legend, in some of the talks I've seen of his, has said that research says we don't really need to study grammar, that we'll just pick it up naturally. And that's what I've found. When I've lowered the difficulty of material that I've been using, in fact, I haven't been just about following along with what's going on and catching most of the words, but missing a few bits here and there and having no idea for the grammar. I know what's going on pretty well. And I've got most of the vocabulary, but I'm picking up a few new words here and there. But the biggest thing I noticed is I seem to notice grammar. Because I already know everything else going on, the grammar just seems to be coming naturally, which, like I say, is pretty nice because I don't want to study it. So just find easier content and then put in the hours, and your brain is going to figure it out. We're kind of, as humans, despite what it might feel like, hardwired to learn languages. What we're not hardwired to do is remember lists of grammar, lists of vocabulary and grammar rules. That's not how humans have learnt languages, and in fact, we don't have to. That's similar to what I did with my Chinese, where for years and years I'd absolutely struggled and basically got close to nowhere, but I had a bit of a foundation in the language, trying to remember these lists of vocabulary and grammar rules. And it was a really hard slog trying to study and do it this traditional way. And it wasn't until I picked up a graded reader. Yeah, super basic. So a graded reader is a book for adults learning that language, but it's not for native speakers, and it's got a story that you can read and follow, and it's a revelation. I read that book. Yes, it was super basic, but it was enjoyable. I was learning a language, doing enjoyable stuff, and it wasn't this heavy lift where I had to remember all this stuff. I was just reading, and occasionally there'd be a word I didn't know and a character, and I'd make a note of it and look it up, but mostly I was just having a nice time. And I think that's what we're all after. We would like to have a foreign language that we know reasonably well and have a nice time. And if you haven't learnt a foreign language before, it can all seem so daunting. Think about changing your mindset. If you failed before and your mindset didn't really work, then maybe there's something else you need to try. So if that's helpful to you, there's a video on the screen now about what I've done to change my mindset. Hope you've enjoyed the video, and I'll see you in the next one.